All right, this is Dr. Mick back with our cat, and we're going to be talking about some of the arteries and veins in the cat. So I will say some cats are dyed better than others. This will require patience, it will require precision, and it's going to require a lot of cleaning. So in order to get this visualization of these arteries and veins, I had to gently, using my probe, using a blunt probe, pick away at the fascia to follow them and expose them. So just something to keep in mind and to be very careful of as you proceed. Of course, let us know if you have any questions, but this will take time to do it right. And if your specimen is not adequate, we can have you check somebody else's group and maybe work with them. So we're going to be looking at figure 8.13. We have the terms we need you to know on the worksheet. And I'm going to start with the structure of our heart here. So this is the heart in our cat. And unlike the shark, these guys have 2 atria and 2 ventricles. So here we have our right ventricle and our right atrium. And as the blood comes back to the body, through into the right atrium, into the right ventricle, it's going to get reoxygenated. So it is going to leave to go to the lungs through our pulmonary trunk, which we can see coming off of the right ventricle. Then on the other side, which I'm going to have to rotate our heart a little bit, and I'm going to try and move our cat, we have our left atria, or atrium, I should say, and our left ventricle. And this is going to pump blood to the rest of the body. So coming out of the left ventricle, we have our systemic arch. And coming off of our systemic arch, we have our left subclavian artery, which is right here. Just trying to move any extraneous things out of the way. So our left subclavian artery. And I should say, so we have our systemic trunk, which has our left subclavian artery. Then we have our brachiocephalic artery. So that's the other piece directly coming off of the trunk. And that is going to diverge into our left common carotid artery and the right common carotid artery. So if I move this vein out of the way, you can kind of see how that diverges into the common carotid arteries. From there, we are going to have our, still sticking with the arteries for right now, we're going to have our axillary artery. This is going to then branch off further down the arm, and we're going to have our subscapular artery. And if we follow along further towards the arm, we have our brachial artery. So that's it for the arteries that we're going to require you to know. So now I'm going to do veins. So we have our precava. Then we have our internal mammary vein, and this is going to be cut. So here, our first kind of main little branch, it just looks like a nub at this point, is our internal mammary vein. Then we are going to have our brachiocephalic vein, which is going to be coming off of the precava. So our brachiocephalic vein, our external jugular veins. We have one, and this one is a good example. It's nice and thick. This is actually a common site of blood draw for when we're doing blood work on cats, our external jugular vein. We also have that on this side as well. It was thinner in this side, so I don't think the latex was quite as good, but external jugular vein. And then we're going to have our axillary vein. We already know that our axillary artery is over here. So here's our axillary vein. Here we have the subclavian vein, the axillary vein, which going towards the arm becomes the brachial vein. The dye is not prominent in that area, but going towards the arm, it becomes the brachial vein. And up here, we have the subscapular vein. Moving on to our next figure, because that was all for figure 8.13. Moving on, one final thing from that figure, which you should know by now, is the pericardium, which is the sac that covers the heart. As we know, we've seen a similar structure in the lamprey, we've seen it in the frog, so that one is definitely expected for you to know by now, but just for, repetition's sake, we have the pericardium. So then moving on to figure 8.17, which in your lab manual is page 171, we have 3 terms that we want you to know. And for this, we're gonna have to go into the abdomen of the cat. We're going to very gently move our GI organs to the side. And again, we'll go over those next week, so you'll get to learn a little bit more. But as we saw in the last figure, we saw the pre-cava. Here we have the post-cava, which is this thick blue line, since this is a big vein that brings blood back to the heart. So the post-cava. Alongside that, we have the dorsal aorta, which lies against the body wall here. The red dye is not very obvious, but you should be able to see that there is, let me see if I can kind of lift it a little with my probe here. We have the dorsal aorta. And then we have the renal artery and vein. So the renal, anything renal has to do with the kidney. So coming off of the post-cava, we have our renal vein. So after the kidneys are filtering blood, it's going out through here. And we have the renal artery, which is coming off of the dorsal aorta and is bringing blood to the kidney. So renal artery, renal vein. Our last figure is 8.18 on page 172, and we have 2 terms there that we want you to know. This is going to be at the bottom of the cat, so at the caudal end of the cat. So what happens to the pre-cava and the dorsal aorta towards the end of the body? So we are going to have the first major branch off the dorsal aorta here. You can see it branches to, this is the cat's right side, and then on the cat's left side. And this is going to be called the external iliac artery. So once the blood is, we've reached the end of the cat more or less, we just have the legs, it's going to break up into the external iliac artery. And then coming off of the post-cava in that similar location, we have the common iliac vein. And the arteries are taking over here, but you can see it splits off into 2. I'm just gonna give the camera a second to focus. And then I'm just gonna show you from a slightly different angle here. So then, since it's going into the legs, you can see where that branching happened. So here's the cat's left leg, and we can see a branch. And the right leg, the dye is not as thick, but we have that coming down the right side. Oftentimes, cats can get, it's not uncommon for cats to get blood clots in this area where the aorta is splitting. It's called a saddle thrombus when that happens because it's seated right at that branching point. And unfortunately, this is often a time where the cats are screaming in pain, circulation is cut off to their hind legs, and a lot of times this unfortunately does end in euthanasia. So just something to be aware of as a practical application. And of course, if you ever see it in your kitties, that requires an immediate veterinary visit. But that's all the structures we have for you for this cat. We look forward to seeing you in lab and seeing what your specimens have.